Everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Doc and the Poet Show. My name is Devin Porter, otherwise known as the Poet, and I'm here with my partner in crime, Dr. Brooke Taylor, otherwise known as Doc. Brooke, it's great to be with you today. How you doing?
You too, Devin. It's just what a treat. This is one of my favorite moments to sit down, film Doc and the Poet, be back with our tribe. Hello, everyone. Just very encouraged by the growth and just so happy to be here with you. How are you?
I'm doing absolutely wonderful, and thank you so much to everyone who has been watching and supporting so far. We're a very young channel, and for those of you who are just joining us, the Doc and the Poet Show, we take different topics that we think reflect the toxic divide, and we don't need to explain to you what that is. I think you all know that. And we try to unpack those, and we try to look at these topics from a more of a centrist point of view, and we try to find a way to create a new conversation based around some of these very divisive topics. And so, the name of our video today is Bud Light, the Death of a Brand. And it's very topical, right? This has been all in the news lately, right?
Yes, I mean, literally real time as we're talking about it today. I think it's just in our face, but a timely conversation, and I, like anything, I want your thoughts on it. What are you making of this?
Well, it's kind of what our general theme is that we're looking at what the two sides are saying, and it's a big controversy about the commercial that Bud Light did a couple of weeks ago, and the left is saying, what's the big deal? This was fun, this was tongue-in-cheek, and the right is saying, it's just too much, and that's a conversation where there's really not a lot of middle ground, right? We've done this before. We actually make this hand motion a lot, right? The sides are entrenched. It doesn't appear that there's any middle ground, but of course, this is why you come to us, and we believe that we can actually take a new and interesting angle in this conversation without getting sucked down into the muck and the weeds of this very divisive conversation. And I think that by doing that, we can actually talk about the idea of this boycott and the idea of the mega corporation, the relationship that we have with these giant brands and these giant companies, and is that a good relationship? Should these large companies be in politics at all? What do you think, bro?
So I think that in having the conversation, Devin, it really is, as Bud Light's the example, but honestly, any corporation could have had this real-time lessons learned, spotlight of a moment, right? So I don't think we're beating up on Bud Light, but in thinking about the conversation, they missed it by a mile. And I think it comes to the point of what's the role of a corporation when you look at big business, when you look at your consumer base, your product, your brand. I mean, my question is Bud Light in the political business? Personally, when I think about someone, or just ourselves, at the end of the day, you want to drink, you're unwinding. It's honestly a way to escape and socialize from all of the toxicity that you've been a part of any day. And so to have just literally that brand shoving an agenda, down your throat, it's just, they missed it by a mile.
It's interesting that you say that, Brooke, because beer is a very interesting product in this sense, because it's easier to boycott a very quickly consumed product. Some of you may remember, Brooke, that Gillette razors got into a controversy about 3 years ago with an ad that offended a big chunk of its customer base, and there was a boycott. And it was mildly successful, but it wasn't just devastating to Gillette. And one of the reasons for that is that how often do you buy razors, right? 3-4 times a year, right? But you buy beer much more often than that, at least for the people who drink beer, So it's an easier product to boycott, and you can see the effects a lot quicker. And so, some of the numbers that are coming out is that it looks like Bud Light sales over the last 2-3 weeks are down, closing in on 20%. And that's pretty significant for a large company. And Brooke, to what you said, beer in particular is something that is a personal product for us. And we drink it, and for those of us who drink it on a regular basis, we drink it to relax. We drink it because we want to get away from a lot of the stuff in the day-to-day, and one of those things is the toxic divide. So I want to come home and want to drink my beer, and I don't want to think about all this toxicity that's out there. And I think that Bud Light's misstep was that they reminded their customers of this toxicity. And, clearly it was a misstep, and, it's not like we've never seen a brand die, right?
No.
Woolworths.
Right.
Sears, right? And Sears is not quite dead yet, but let's be honest, they probably don't have, they're not long for this world. And at one time, Sears was the king of the world. You could order a house through the Sears catalog. And so brands can die.
Yes.
And it's not totally uncommon. Schlitz Beer killed itself in the 70s with this hilariously terrible marketing campaign, and it never really came back. But when these brands die, it takes them a really long time. And if Bud Light dies, it may be a lot quicker, don't you think?
But it's the examination of how, Devin, did those other companies die? I mean, did you misunderstand the trends in the market in terms of how consumers used or interacted with that brand? Did you misunderstand the fact that you went from a catalog to a digital base? Did you misunderstand the fact of just, you know, for the Blockbuster, you know, the red box kind of? And so these things, like, you know, corporations are not immune from failure, to your point. But Bud Light caused that failure. Yeah. They've caused themselves to kind of interpret this taboo in the news because as a corporation, they misunderstood their consumer. Right. They're like not by a little, by a lot, by a mile. And so for me, it comes, you know, I grew up, my family was small business owners. And so when you look at the idea of small business, community, the employee base, the workforce that day in and day out shows up, you know, for survival, versus these big corporations and these CEOs and your employee base that, you know, has shares in stocks. You know, this misinterpretation of the consumer base was very much an ivory tower corporation agenda and not identifying with the consumer base that is America. And that is, I think, in real time, Bud Light, you know, is learning this lesson. We'll see how they survive and how they pivot or grow beyond it, and honestly how other trends of corporations will learn these same kinds of things, because at the end of the day the corporation should be about a product, a profit, and the people that are the consumer and that are their employee kind of workforce.
And you know, that's exactly what we're talking about, is that you pivot this conversation from this battle into exactly what you're saying, Brooke, is that we need to re-examine our whole relationship with these giant companies, because the bigger you get as a company, the further away you get from your actual customers and your actual employees. When you've got a bazillion employees, it's very difficult to maintain that culture and that relationship. And so that's what I think that we can take out in the world, right? When we're out there talking to people and you hear about this controversy, why wouldn't we pivot as practical centrists, right? As a centrist philosophy, which we're trying to get to. Why wouldn't we say, look, let's get away from this social discussion, which is not getting us anywhere, and we keep going like this, and let's pivot to a different conversation about what's our relationship with a large corporation? Is a large corporation a net benefit to society, or is it not? And you know, interestingly enough, Schlitz killed itself with a marketing campaign too. And they changed the recipe of the beer, the quality went down, and then they did this terrible marketing campaign. We can do a whole video just about how bad this thing was. It's hilarious. Look up the Drink Schlitz or I Will Kill You marketing campaign. I swear, just look it up in YouTube. You'll crack up. So, you know, I think that's what we really want to get across, is that it doesn't always have to be this. There's times when we can say, hey, you know, let's go up here. Let's have a high-minded pivot of a different kind of conversation about these controversies. And I think that we may be able to get somewhere.
I do too, and I think I want to hear from the tribe. I mean, does this affect you one way or another? Would it change your consumer preferences? Does it make you just want to be more adamant, to be vocal in the conversation at large of any messaging to big corporations? But at the end of the day, I think that if we were to have this conversation, Devin, you know, next week, how vastly the kind of dynamics around the Bud Light example are continuing to kind of emotionally show themselves. You know, it was an emotional response backed by consumer preferences, honestly shifting that entire brand.
Well, yeah, these brand preferences sometimes they're passed down through families, you know, and we take these things very, very personally, you know. So we're absolutely fascinated and curious to see what you all think. And you know, do you want us to talk about it again in a couple weeks from now? Do you think the Bud Light boycott will be successful or not? So love to hear from you. As always, thank you so much to the tribe for joining us again. And you want to sign us off, Brooke?
No, we're grateful for 10 minutes every week. Just spread the word. The tribe's growing. The word's getting out there. And so we look forward to being back with you next week. And Devin, it's always great to do this with you.
Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you next week.